I'm Robert Sander. My friends and people that know me call me Bob. My Potawatomi heritage is with the Navarre family, and I retired from the Army in 1993 as a colonel. Joined the Army in 1968. Was commissioned at Oklahoma State University out of the ROTC program. Branched field artillery. And then later went to flight school. Went to Vietnam in 1971. Was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division. I joined the Army really, I think, as sort of a black sheep of the family. Neither of my parents were enthusiastic at all about me serving in the military. And particularly if you consider the time. The late 60s, but both of them were true Christian pacifists. They very much believed in nonviolence. But joining the Army was something that it was an ambition from really from my adolescent years, right. And I enjoyed every month of it, every year of it, and if I had it to do over again, I certainly would. To really understand the background of the operation, you've got to go back to 1960-61, when the North Vietnamese were using Laos as an infiltration corridor into South Vietnam. But militarily, it always boiled down to fighting the infiltration, with the prohibition of not being able to go into Laos. You couldn't go into Laos overtly until 1971. And then it was the South Vietnamese Army that actually went into Laos. But there was a loophole in the law that had been recently passed by Congress so that we could provide air support. As the operation progressed, the pilots that were actually going into Laos were flying so many hours that they were, in violation of the crew rest regulations, and that had to declare a tactical emergency. So other pilots came in, and that's where I entered the operation. Essentially, was as a relief pilot for people that were absolutely worn out. Operation Lam Son 719 was a very traumatic event. It was a life-changing event for every pilot that flew in it. The anti-aircraft fire was intense. We lost, by count, the nearest count that I can get that I have confidence in is 174 aircraft. We had probably 600 incidents of combat damage. And I say probably because it's difficult to do that accounting, because the same aircraft would get hit on multiple missions, on multiple sorties. And then eventually some of those aircraft would be totally lost to fire. On every individual mission that was flown, your chances of survival were good. The Army did a great job of training aviators, and we had the best equipment that money could buy at the time. But you rolled those dice so many times that those percentages tended to catch up with you. And so we lost a fair number of air crewmen, pilots, crew chiefs, door gunners, mechanics. If I remember the numbers correctly, and they're in the book, the Army ran 134 search and rescue operations, and in the process brought out just under 400 survivors. So without that effort, our casualties would have been much higher. It was not a success, and that was the perspective of the aviators at the time. It doesn't take a genius to know when you've been licked. When you've been beaten, we came nowhere close to accomplishing the objective. President Chu's objectives were much different than President Nixon's objectives. It was just a disaster from day one, whereas the North Vietnamese were very well prepared to defend that area. In reality, we did very little to interrupt the flow of infiltration, which it's better stated as invasion. It was a minor disruption at best. Operationally, from the military perspective on the ground, I had a good grasp for that. But what I learned was really the inner workings of the policies and politics that took us there. And to me, that was the great revelation. I was not so interested in recording how people died, but why.